We were sitting on Wanda's ottoman. She wore her ermine-trimmed jacket, and her hair was loose and wild as a lion's mane. She clung to my lips, drawing my soul from my body. My head was spinning, my heart beating violently against hers. "I want to place myself entirely in your hands, Wanda," I exclaimed suddenly, in a storm of passion that deprived me of all reason. "Without conditions, with no limitations on your power over me, I want to be at the mercy of your every whim." On saying these words, I fell at her feet and gazed up at her, intoxicated. "How handsome you are now," she exclaimed, "with your eyes half closed in ecstasy. You enrapture me. How beautiful your gaze would be at the moment of expiring, after you had been beaten to death. You have the eyes of a martyr." I sometimes find it disturbing to be so totally at the mercy of a woman. With all the power in her hands, what if she were to take unfair advantage of my passion? I am now actually experiencing those things that have so preoccupied me from early childhood and have always filled me with such sweet fear. What senseless apprehension! She is playing a capricious game with me, no more. Of course she loves me, and she is so good, so noble, quite incapable of treachery. But everything rests in her hands. If she wants to betray me, she can. How exquisite is this agonizing doubt! Now I understand Manon Lescaut and the unhappy Chevalier, who even in the pillory still adored his faithless mistress. Love knows neither virtue nor merit. When we love, we forgive and forget everything, for we have no choice. It is not our judgment that leads us. It is not the qualities or faults that we discover in the loved one that inflame our passion or cause us to draw back in horror. We are driven by a gentle and mysterious power that deprives us of all will and reason, and we are swept along with no thought for the morrow. When we were in town today, a Russian prince made his first appearance on the promenade. His athletic body, his well-shaped features, and his splendid apparel aroused everyone's interest. The ladies in particular were all agape at the sight of this handsome wild animal, but the prince paid attention to no one and went his way with a sober air. He was accompanied by 2 servants, a Negro all dressed in red satin and a Turquesse in brilliant attire. Suddenly he noticed Wanda and fixed his cold, piercing eyes on her. He even turned around, and when she had passed he stood still and followed her with his gaze. As for Wanda, she devoured him with her gleaming green eyes and seemed ready to give anything in the world to see him again. I felt a lump in my throat as I watched the refined coquetry of her walk, the studied gracefulness of her movements as she turned to look at him. When we were home, I remarked on this. She frowned. "What of it?" she said. "The prince is a man who could be attractive to me. In fact, if I may say so, he fascinates me. After all, I am free to do as I please." "Do you no longer love me?" I asked in a trembling voice. "I love no one but you," she replied, "but I shall let the prince pay court to me." "Wanda!" "Are you not my slave?" she asked calmly. "Am I not Venus, cruel Venus, in the northern firs?" I was silent. I felt crushed by her words. Her cold stare pierced my heart like a dagger. "I want you to find out immediately what the prince's name is, where he lives, and everything you can learn about him. Do you understand?" "But—" "No objections, obey!" she cried, with a sternness of which I would never have thought her capable. "Do not let me see you again until you have an answer to all my questions." It was not until afternoon that I could bring Wanda the desired information. She made me stand before her like a servant, while she reclined in an armchair, listening with a smile. She then nodded, apparently satisfied. "Bring me my footstool," she ordered. I obeyed, and after placing it before her and resting her feet on it, I remained on my knees. "How will this end?" I asked despondently, after a brief silence. Wanda chuckled. "It hasn't begun yet." "You are even more heartless than I thought," I replied, wounded. "Severin," began Wanda earnestly, "I have done nothing yet, not the slightest thing, and you already call me heartless. What will happen when I fully satisfy your wishes and lead a carefree life, surrounded by a circle of admirers, when I fulfill your ideal and kick and whip you?" "You take my fantasies too seriously." "Too seriously? When I undertake something, there can be no question of jesting. You know that I detest all play acting and melodrama. Was it my idea or yours? Did I lead you into this, or is it you who aroused my imagination? At any rate, we are now in earnest. Wanda, I replied tenderly, be reasonable and listen to me. We have such enormous love for each other. We are so happy. Would you sacrifice all our future to a whim? This is no whim. What is it then? I asked fearfully. Something that was already in me, she said thoughtfully. It might never have seen the light of day had you not aroused and cultivated these tendencies. Now that it has become a powerful impulse, now that I am enjoying the situation intensely, you want to turn back. Tell me, are you a man? Dear sweet Wanda, I began to caress and kiss her. Leave me alone. You are not a man. And what are you? I asked, flushing with anger. I am selfish, she said. You know that. I am not like you, strong in imagination and weak in action. When I make up my mind to do something, I carry it through. The more resistance I meet with, the more determined I become. Leave me alone. She pushed me away and rose to her feet. Wanda, I replied with emotion, tears filling my eyes. You do not know how much I love you. She pouted disdainfully. You are mistaken, I continued. You are making yourself out to be more evil than you really are. You are far too good, far too noble by nature. What do you know about my nature? She interrupted violently. You will get to know me as I really am. Wanda, make up your mind. Will you submit unconditionally? And what if I refuse? Then? She came toward me, cold and ironic, and stood with her arms folded across her breast, that wicked smile on her lips. Here indeed was the despotic woman of my dreams. Her features were harsh, and I could read nothing in her eyes that promised kindness or mercy. Very well, she said at last. You are cruel, I said. You are going to whip me. Oh no, I shall let you go. You are free. I am not holding you. Wanda, I who love you so. Yes, you, sir, who worship me, she cried contemptuously. You who are also a coward, a liar, and a perjurer, get out of my sight. Wanda, you wretch. The blood rose to my head. I threw myself at her feet and burst into tears. More tears, she laughed. Oh, how dreadful that laugh was. Away with you. I never want to see you again. Oh my God, I cried, beside myself. I will do whatever you command. I will be your slave, your thing. You may treat me as you please, but do not reject me. I shall be lost. I cannot live without you. I embraced her knees and covered her hands with kisses. You must be a slave and taste the lash, for you are not a man, she said calmly. This is what hurt me most. She was neither angry nor even excited, but she spoke in an even voice. I know you now. I know your dog-like nature. You worship whoever tramples you underfoot, and the more you are abused, the more slavish your adoration. But you are only just about to discover me. She stalked up and down while I remained on my knees, my head bowed and my face flooded with tears. Come and see me, ordered Wanda, settling on the ottoman. I obeyed and came to sit next to her. She gave me a sober look. Then suddenly her eyes lit up with an inner glow, and she drew me to her breast and dried my tears with kisses. The comic side of my situation is that I can escape, but do not want to. I am ready to endure anything as soon as she threatens to set me free. If only she would take up the whip again. There is something uncanny in the way she treats me. I feel like a mouse held captive by a beautiful cat who plays with it daintily, and at any moment is ready to tear it to pieces. My mouse's heart beats so hard that it will break. What are her plans? What does she intend to do with me? She seems to have forgotten completely about the contract and my status of slave. Or was it only ever a whim? And did she give up her plans as soon as I no longer offered her any resistance and yielded to her imperious will? How kind she is to me at present, how tender and loving. Blissful days float by. Today she asked me to read her the scene in Faust where Mephistopheles appears as a wandering scholar. She seemed strangely satisfied and could not take her eyes off me. I do not understand, she said when I had finished, how a man can express such great and beautiful thoughts in such a clear way, so accurately and rationally, while being at the same time a romantic and a super sensualist. You enjoyed it? I asked, kissing her hand. She stroked my forehead affectionately. I love you, Severin, she murmured. I believe I could never love anyone more than you. Let us be reasonable, shall we? Instead of replying, I folded her in my arms. My heart was filled with deep love and passionate longing. My eyes became moist, and a tear fell on her hand. How can you cry? She exclaimed. What a child you are. While we were out driving today, we met the Russian prince. He looked disagreeably surprised to see me by Wanda's side, and looked as though he wanted to transpierce her with his magnetic green eyes. As for her, I could have knelt before her and kissed her feet. She did not appear to notice him, and let her gaze drift indifferently past him as though he were an object, a tree, for example. She then turned to me and smiled her adorable smile. Today, as I was saying good night to her, she seemed suddenly listless and distressed without reason. What could be preoccupying her? I am sorry to see you go, she began, as I stood on the threshold. It is entirely up to you to shorten my ordeal. Cease tormenting me, I implored. Do you think this constraint is not also a torture for me? She asked. Then bring it to an end, I said, embracing her. Be my wife. Never, Severin, she said gently, but with great firmness. What do you mean? I was stunned. You are not the husband for me. I looked at her, and slowly withdrawing my arm, which was still around her waist, I left the room. She uttered not a word to call me back. A sleepless night, during which I took numerous decisions, only to discard them one after another. In the morning I wrote her a letter declaring our relations at an end. My hands trembled as I wrote, and I burnt my fingers while sealing the letter. As I went upstairs to give it to the chambermaid, my knees threatened to give way. Suddenly the door opened, and Wanda appeared with her hair in curlers. I have not yet arranged my hair, she said with a smile. What have you there? A letter. For me? I nodded. Aha, you want to break with me, she said ironically. Did you not tell me yesterday that I was not the husband for you? I repeat it now. Then, I was shaking from head to foot and my voice failed me. I handed her the letter. Keep it, she said, eyeing me coldly. You forget that it is no longer relevant whether you satisfy me as a husband or not. As a slave, you do well enough. Madame, I gasped. Yes, that is how you are to address me in future, answered Wanda, throwing back her head in a gesture of unutterable contempt. Have your belongings ready within 24 hours. I am leaving tomorrow for Italy, and you will accompany me as my servant. Wanda. I will not have any familiarity, she snapped. What is more, you will have no right to visit me unless I call or ring for you, and you will not speak to me unless I address you first. From now on your name is no longer Severin, but Gregor. I was trembling with rage, but I cannot deny that I also felt a thrill of pleasure. But, madame, I said anxiously, surely you know my situation. I am still financially dependent on my father, and I am afraid that the large sum I shall require for such a journey. That means that you will have no money, Gregor, remarked Wanda delightedly. So much the better. You will thus be completely dependent on me, and you will really be my slave. You do not think, I objected feebly, that as a man of honor I could possibly... I think, she replied imperiously, that as a man of honor you should, above all, keep your word to follow me everywhere as my slave and obey all my commands. Now off with you, Gregor. I turned to go. Not yet. You may kiss my hand first. She nonchalantly held out her hand to me, and I, pitiful amateur, fool, miserable slave, I pressed it with tenderness to my parched and burning lips. At last, with a kindly nod, she dismissed me.